I don't really have a lot to say. I've only got 3 words on each page, though. My brother and my mom thought they were bad. Who is my dad? To me, my dad's done a lot of things. Through the years, I've had different perceptions of who my dad was. When I was young, thank you. When I was younger, my dad was a giant. I remember the time a horse ran away with me. I'm sure everybody else, my brothers and sisters do too. We lived in Georgia at the time, and the owners owned some horses and some pigs in the back we took care of. And one day we were riding, and I don't know how old I was. I was 5, my mother says, and a horse ran away with me. Ran out of the crowd and out in the woods, and I wouldn't duck. I'd just stand there, letting the limbs scratch me and cut me. And by the time Dad got there, I was bleeding on the face and everything. Here it was. And he took me off the horse and put me down. And before I knew it, Dad had the horse by one hand, had the bridle in one hand, and had reared back and hit that horse right on the nose. And that poor horse, we had one called Big Red and one called Little Joe, and that was Big Red. And when he got through with him, he looked just like Little Joe. That was a giant to me. That was, when you're 5 or 6, that's big. My dad was also, I know it sounds harsh, he was a slave driver. He was a slave driver. From the time I was old enough to remember, old enough to walk, old enough to talk, my job when my dad got home was to take his shoes off. I can't remember when I stopped. I might have stopped in 11th grade. I don't know. But when my dad got home, he'd sit back in his recliner, and instead of taking what I do now, I take the toe of one shoe and put it on the heel of the other and just flip that shoe off. But my dad, he takes care of his shoes. He said, "Kevin, come here, take my shoes off." And if you've ever took a whiff of your shoes after a 12-hour day, you'd believe it was slave driving too. But another responsibility I had, which is why I call him a slave driver, which I love him though, is it was as a quarter of my responsibility to turn the television set. Especially while I was watching. If I was watching a program, it was my responsibility to turn the television. My dad would come in the room, sit down. "What is this mess on TV?" And you just wince because you knew the next thing out of his mouth would be, "Turn the television set." And that's slave driving. Another thing my dad is to me is a comedian. And I bet, I don't think my sister remembered this when I told her the story, but it's once my brother and Dad went fishing early one morning, and I stayed at home. And we were living up here on Johnson Street in West Memphis. And when they came home, they found me in the bathtub. I got up that morning, I was going to take a bath, and I was taking a bath, and they came in, and nothing but a handful of minnows came flying through the air and landed in the bathtub, and nothing but a white streak went the other way. And I'm just glad they didn't catch any fish. And that's a comedian. And my dad was, I was going to use the story about the prize fighter. My dad was a prize fighter, and was pulling chains in football. And he was also a race car driver. It's about my belated football career. I almost got what my brother calls my big break in football, which was a young gentleman from Cross County broke my left knee. And in the first 3 games I ever played in the senior high ball, and I got my knee broke. They put me in Dad's car. And they looked me over and put me in the car. And it was about that time I looked over at Dad, and I knew 2 things. Right then I knew 2 things. Number one, he was hurting more than I was. And number 2, it wasn't going to take very long to get to the hospital in West Memphis. 16 miles away. And once we topped 75 and pulled about 6 G's in the car, I looked over at Dad and I said, "Dad, I'm really not hurting that bad." And but we got there, I don't know how long it took, but it like a blink of an eye. And, I could put a lot more names on my dad, and I can make a lot more jokes, because he's a lot of things. He's Well, another thing is he's a painter. He's always been, as long as I can remember. He's managed to paint a vivid picture every time he wanted to say anything to the kids. I remember one thing he painted for me was when I made an F on a math test in school. And he told me, he said, if you don't bring that grade up, I'm going to come down on you like a cloud. And that painted a pretty big picture to me, and I remember that pretty vividly. But, I could put a lot more names on him, like I say. Number one thing I can remember is that he stood there by me, by all of us kids, and he loved us, and he provided for us, and that's one thing that that's not got a lot of glory feel, that you can't tell a lot of stories about, because when you go to work day in and day out to put the food on the table and the clothes on the kids' back, it doesn't seem to stand out as much when you're going back and remembering it. The thing that stands out to me is my dad was always there, and he always provided and gave me whatever we needed. And for the little things like that, that's why we love him so much, why I love him so much.
A lot of folks up there. Yeah, Doug, get up there. There's one missing.
Just push him up and get ready.
I will. He's up there. Y'all ready?
Look at that, Carol and Janet. Fake cheese.
You want me to do another one?
You gotta
Twist it.
advance it. Janet, turn yours on.
This is all that's left of the food after Danny and Joe and Tony got through with it.
What you want?
That's what I always tell people.
He's gonna have classes for it, and I hope they're gonna tonight so he can go.
I'm not a different person than I
So what, I got 2 weeks vacation coming up next week. I'm lucky if it's like maybe a week or 2
Well, I
weeks.
think it's gonna be like 1 night.
Y'all ready?
Well,